Hey there! We are already looking at week 3 and Memorial Day week at that, so it's going to be perhaps a little shorter week, longer weekend for us, which is always kind of nice, right? Let's face it. Hopefully, you can use that extra buffer time to capitalize on some reading time and just have a little bit more flexible time. But I do encourage you. I think one of the things that with online learning, and some of you actually might be teaching in a blended or online environment someday. That it's important that just because it's there and available, that you don't always feel like you're tied to it. And I try to actually, you might notice that I'm not quite as prompt on Sundays. We have kind of a electronic free day on Sundays at our house. So consider that. Consider maybe taking Memorial Day really off and away from your electronics, away from even your fun social spaces and things like that, to give yourself just a little bit of breathing room. I think sometimes it's all this information is so close to us. It's something we need to consider too when we're working with students of all ages, how much screen time they're getting and how much information overload they're receiving constantly because of the accessibility of the material that they have just in the palm of their hand. And I'm not anti-technology in any way. Each of my kids, they have iPhones and iTouches and whatnot, but we are very careful in just being aware of how often we're attached. So there's my Memorial Day challenge for you, is to take some time to unplug. Okay, that said, I know it seems kind of contradictory that I would then give you a bunch of plugged in websites to read, but I'm going to do that because we have this class we're cramming in, right? And just want to kind of review each of the articles with you. All of these are linked here, but they're also in your reading section of the classroom. So if we flash over to the read and watch section, you'll see all of this material as well under the week 3 reading links. You'll notice that there are quite a few things, and I talked to another student, well, we didn't talk, we just emailed, just about how to read this material. And so as we go through this, I just want to kind of highlight for you what I visualize and think about in the time spent on each of these materials, okay? The Outwell Teaching with a capital T has a lot of good stuff in it, and I would say when you're reading the textbook, it's probably worthy of a pretty close read. And but I also want to preface that as she uses a lot of examples, and I think once you get it, you can move on, right? So I would do a more careful read of the chapters 10 through 14. For the Edutopia site, I love, first of all, you can subscribe to the site, and they send really great teaching materials, very upbeat, positive, well-researched, well-written stuff. And this is an example of a type of assessment, because we're going to be talking about assessments this week. And so this is not something you'd have to do a real close read of. It's giving you ideas. We're going to be talking about summative and formative assessments, and I'm really not sure how many of you have had what kind of background with these, but the ProvostTufts.edu site that I'm pointing at right now is actually just sort of an overview, more of like an intellectual overview. It's a PDF of what the difference is and what characterizes each. I do want you to be very informed about these, because a lot of the discussions we're going to have over on the right hand side of the page here are going to hinge on your understanding of summative and formative. But if you just come off of a class where this is beat to death, or you really have a great grasp, you might even be able to just skip this or skim it. Common Core Standards app is a resource I want you to have. I do not recommend that you read every Common Core standard, okay? But maybe identify a grade that you want to, a grade or grade range that you want to acclimate yourself to, and focus on those. And like I said, I really recommend the app. It's set up really nicely, and it's free. Okay, if you need more information on that, you can email me if you can't find it. Okay, the edutopia.org blog, the second one is again a resource blog of strategies for improving student writing. And this is again just looking at assessing student writing, and so it's an idea spot Faculty focus is, again, more targeted for older students. So some of you might find it sort of alienating to your younger population. You could skip it if you don't think it's going to work, but it's examples of prompts that get students to think, analyze, reflect, relate, all that critical thinking stuff. Sometimes how we ask the question is even more important than we even realize. And then this piece right here is a resource that I love, so I wish you would at least glance at it for me. It's from the They Say, I Say textbook. It's a college text, but I love it for younger writers. And you elementary teachers are actually better at this than us high school teachers. We do a lot of template writing when they're younger, and then we lose that when they're older because they don't need it, right? Well, it's true that they don't need the thick lined paper anymore, although some of them might, judging by my older kids' handwriting. But they still might need some training wheels, especially for developing higher end arguments. And so this is a good site, I would say, for everyone. If you're trying to teach transitions, if you're trying to teach students how to incorporate quotes, if you're trying to teach students how to write thesis statements, this PDF is a really good resource. So I would recommend at least taking a glance at it, getting the concept of it, and tucking it away for later. It might be one of those things you might want to refer to later. And then the next thing is just the Bloom's Taxonomy Review, and this is like the updated new one. Again, it's a resource here for you. I don't expect you to go through and read it unless you haven't looked at it for a while, and then you might want to. And the creativity and assessment video will not take much of your time, but it has a huge impact, in my opinion. So I hope that as I went through this, you got the idea of which things are more resources, idea places, and which things are the more get your hands dirty, really focus on. Then we have some weekly videos this week as well. If I flash over here quickly, I think the only video is the creativity and assessment. I don't think I have a guest lecture. I think this was my week off because we're so heavy on other resources this week, so there is no guest lecture video. All right, so what are we doing? Assessments are sort of a dry topic in some ways, but when we look at writing as a way of assessing student learning, I want to challenge us to look at it in two different ways, the formative and summative, and really analyze and be very deliberate and intentional on what we're calling formative, what we're calling summative, and when and where to implement different strategies for teaching writers to grow. Like, for example, for years I always did peer edits, and I tend to do this even now in my college classes on the day before, or the class period before the papers due. Is that the best time to do a peer edit, or should a peer edit come earlier? Should there be more space between that edit point and that turn-in point? Things to think about. When they turn in that paper, is it a final grade of mastery, or was that intention of that writing assignment meant to be more to get us a feel of where that student's at, and to show progress, and to show that a student has grown and made a measurable growth goal, not necessarily completely mastered a type of writing. And I think about that with lengths of writing. If we always have a 2-page paper due, is it maybe more effective to have a couple paragraphs of assignments of all introductions to form our mastery of introduction writing before we move on to a bigger paper? So you see kind of where this is all going. What are you going to do this week? You're going to do obviously the reading and the watching, but what are you going to contribute to the discussion? I see my numbering's off. We've got 2 1s. That happens to me all the time. I hate the auto format on Word. Doggone. Anyway, okay, so discussion board. Before you even read anything, you can answer this. Talk about writing assessments as they relate to formative and summative types. If you need to review what they are first, go over here. What features in writing tasks distinguish between the 2 assessment types? And why do the types matter? Why do we even talk about which type is which? Does it really matter? And why might it matter? How might it influence the way you craft a writing lesson? Or, if that was just like way too dry for you, you can go into this, and that's as fun. I don't care which one you write. What are your tried and true strategies for success as a writer? What are your go-to methods? And we talked about this a little bit last week as I was looking through, and actually in week 1, some of you talked about with your best and worst writing assignments ever. You talked about some of your methods as a writer. maybe really play them out here. And why we want to evaluate how we write and what our strategies are, how we're successful, what our go-to methods are, is we want to see which of those might be adaptable to the learning end. How can we teach students how to adapt their own styles of learning to a tried and true method? And is there a way to rethink how our methods are from a teaching end so that we're really creating growth in students? And again, back to that formative summative, that's why it kind of links in there, is that, what the thing that we think of as the writing process, which parts of that are we going to assess in which ways? Okay, so the blog. By the way, we've got the nuts and bolts of all these down now, I think, and you guys were turning in a wiki last week, so hopefully we'll have kind of feel like we can really navigate smooth sailing now, since we're almost halfway through the course, since it's so short. For the blog this week, you're creating a chart or graphic. Don't kill yourself over trying to figure out a fancy schmancy chart or graphic. But if you see somebody's that posts early because they're like really tech savvy and you like what they did, absolutely message them and ask them how they did that. So I don't want it just to be a list. I would like a graphic here because this would be something that you could eventually put into your wiki, and I think it's going to be good to have different accessibilities and just easy points of entry for readers outside looking at this. So graphic of your favorite writing prompts or writing tasks. You can make original ones. You can use the resource pages that I gave you. You can find your own resources if you wish. And I'd like you to label them as whether you envision seeing them as being used as formative or summative. Probably all of them could be used for, you could argue either way, okay, because sometimes those lines are a little hard to, but I want you to be intentional in thinking, okay, here's a writing prompt, here's how I would use it, and I think it would fit best as formative because this, and then how does it fit to that Common Core standard for that age group you're looking at? If you're going to be certified for several ages, which many of you are, choose one or two. Don't. I'd like you to vary it a little bit so that you're not always stuck in 3rd grade or always stuck in 9th grade or whatever. But for 1 week at a time, let's get really comfortable with one set of standards first, right? And maybe this is redundant to even other classes you've had. I hope it's not too much overlap. Okay, for the wiki that's not going to be due until next week, you're going to be too much movement, possibly taking, here we go, these prompts, not necessarily, but you could borrow one from the other. There is intentional overlap here this week. And you're going to be creating 4 writing tasks, and this is going to be the hub of our entire portfolio. And I want each prompt or activity or task, I've worded it loosely on purpose, to be written in student language. We need a grading rubric, and we need 2 formative and 2 summative assessments. They could all be part of the same unit. They could overlap. They could be 4 completely separate things. You're going to create teaching notes, terms that you're going to need. You're going to be creating all of the teaching materials to teach out these 4 writing lessons, and it will be tied to the Common Core standards. This week of wiki, this 2 weeks of wiki, is pretty huge, but remember, the reason we're setting up it as a wiki is so you can go and develop it and fill it out and create more later. I think that just as a closing thought on this, as you're looking for ideas, I keep saying the words intentional and deliberate, and I think that might be our best theme to think about as we walk through ideas this week. How, thinking of our objective, what we want to see in students as individuals and class-wide to be competent and prepared writers and expressors of ideas. What do we need to do at each step of the process, and how should we be assessing, how should we be setting up these lessons in order to really be able to give a true assessment of what students are able to do and how we can move them to their next level of writing. And how we craft these tasks is setting the stage for making all of that happen. Have a great week. If you have questions, please give me a shout. I didn't do much lecture this week. I mostly walked through assignments, but hopefully you get the idea. Have a